Well, thank you for being with us once again. Welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here. Today, we get to interview someone who's who's been involved in an industry we haven't talked about before. Rocco Bova was a hotelier for 25 years. He is a consultant in the industry. So we get to talk all about travel, tourism, and hotels and all sorts of things like that today with Rocco. I know he's got a lot of thoughts and a lot of things to discuss with us. So looking forward to this a whole lot. Well, Rocco, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're glad you're here.
Mike, thank you so much for inviting me. I like this unstoppable mindset. This is one of the things why it got my attention. And when we connected on LinkedIn, so I'm glad and honored to be invited in your show today.
And you are down in Mexico right now, right?
It's correct. I live in Mérida, Yucatan. So it's on the southeast peninsula of Mexico. Let's say about 3 hours drive from Cancun, just to give a bit of a geography so that everybody is clear on where I'm based.
So in the winter, do you get any kind of snow?
Not really.
Yeah.
But let me tell you that yesterday for the first night, I felt cold at night. So we went down probably to about 22 Celsius, which is kind of winter for us.
What temperature?
22 Celsius.
Well, 22 Celsius is pretty warm.
It is pretty warm, but it's cold because when you are used to sleep with air conditioning, because outside is 36 Celsius. So
good point. Good point.
Definitely is cold for us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Now, just so that people understand, if you're listening to Rocco, that is not a Mexican accent because he's from Italy.
Absolutely. I was born in Italy, Mike, but I left Italy very young. I was only 18 when I left my village in the south of Italy. It's a little village called Scilla. In fact, I live in the Strait of Sicily. So from my hometown, I can see the tip of Sicily on the other side of the water. So it's a beautiful place. But when I was growing up, I said to myself, I'm not going to stay here. I want to explore the world. I want to travel for as far as I can. And thanks God, I've been in few places. So I'm very happy that, I decided to leave my home very young.
Right. What was it like growing up in Italy, and what was it like for you growing up as a child? And you went to school and all that. Have a pretty normal childhood, or what?
I'm proud to say that probably I had the best childhood that one can have. So, I was raised by wonderful parents. I have three brothers and sisters. We have four of us all together, and we love each other. The family grew obviously with nephews and nieces and so on and so forth. But I think that the most important is also the environment where you grow up, is the friends you grow up with. Your circle, that influence your life and eventually your future, So, my childhood and, also my teenage, I was growing, the era of, the 80s, between 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Those years were probably the peak of the century. And, I was lucky to enjoy certain lifestyle, during this period of time. So, I also was inspired by certain people, that may sound stupid, but even Rocky, watching this kind of movies, were very motivating, very inspiring, that even a normal person can achieve great things.
Yeah.
Through effort and hard work. And, that's basically what my life is about. I knew I could do it. It was just a matter of being focused and really work really hard for what I wanted to do. So here I am after living in 11 countries and working for more than 25 companies, some of the best companies in the hospitality industry. So what can I say?
What did your parents think of you wanting to leave and explore the world?
Actually, my dad was very scared. May he rest in peace. he was always very worried about me, and he was thinking, Rocco, what are you gonna do? You don't have a career, you don't have a, I didn't study university. I went to university later in life, but I didn't study when I was young, So when I finished my high school, I went straight to work. And my mom was also, kind of, stay in Italy, don't go away, where are you going? And then suddenly, my life obviously changed because, I was so unstoppable that, I just felt that everything was achievable, just through effort and hard work. And yes, indeed, I achieved what I wanted. And, my mom now, she told me, it was a good choice that you left Italy and you went to follow your dreams.
So she now feels that you made a pretty good choice.
Definitely.
Well, that's pretty cool. So she supports you, and are your siblings in Italy still, or where are they?
Yeah. The entire family stayed in Italy. Nobody was crazy as me. The first time I left my hometown, I bought a one-way ticket, and I only had a few $100s in my pocket. So,
Right.
I'm kind of like the risk. Let's put it this way.
So in addition to doing all the things that you've done, have you started a family? Are you married or have any children or anything?
Yes, I have two beautiful kids. They're now older. They're not children anymore. So my son is 20 and my daughter is 19. And married for about 28 years with my wife. So very, very happy to have achieved also
part of my
personal life.
Being married for 28 years is certainly good. There's so many couples that just don't make it that far. So I am really glad to hear you continuing to do that.
My wife says that, we are kind of a museums couple. There are not many like us nowadays.
We were married 40 years when my wife passed away last November. So I appreciate it.
Definitely, yeah. Sorry to hear that, but 40 years of big milestone, definitely.
Yeah, well, I'm a lot of memories and definitely enjoy it. Well, I'm really glad that you're doing so well and you have two good kids. What are they going to do with their life? Are they going to go off and explore the world too?
It looks like they are, because my son is studying hospitality management, and I can see already, kind of on a right path to travel the world and experience so many new things. My daughter, she's studying marketing. So for her, it's still kind of first year study. But yeah, I'm sure they both speak 4 languages. What can stop them? Nothing really.
And that's great. What does your wife do?
My wife, she's a personal coach, and she's a healer. So she helps people to get better in their life, both from a physical, spiritual, and mental way. So she's been studying this, both as a self-learner, but also through many different courses that she did in different countries, from India to Mauritius and more recently Mexico.
Maybe we should explore her coming on the podcast sometime.
Sure, why not?
We love to talk to coaches.
I will tell her about.
Well, so what did you do? So you left home, and why did you leave home? Did you have a job that you went to, or what?
Believe it or not, I did not have a job when I left. When I left to London, I mean, I was still in Italy and I was working at the time. I was 24. And then one evening I meet this Brazilian guy who tells me at the end of the evening, working this restaurant, he tells me, Rocco, what do you want to do in life? And I was not expecting this question, but then I told him, I want to travel the world. I don't know exactly what I want to do, but one thing I know, I want to travel the world. And he said to me, why don't you come to London? I can help you. So I didn't let him finish the sentence, because I told him, hey, if it's not a joke, I'm coming. And he's
now, how old were you then?
24.
So what did you do from 18 to 24?
I went to Army. I went 1 year to university, but I dropped out after 10 months. And then the other 2 years, I was working. So I did some work. Obviously, I had to
Yeah.
earn my life, and I didn't want to be dependent on my parents. So I worked a couple of years, and so when I came back to Italy for to my hometown for the summer, I met this Brazilian guy, and so when he told me that he was going to help me to get to London, I said, "What? I'm going." So I put all
Cool.
together all the money that I had, which was those days the equivalent to maybe $600, and I bought a one-way ticket, and I went to London with a friend. We went there. We didn't speak English. We were talking, with our hands like most Italian do, but literally we couldn't talk in any other language other than the hands. So it was funny. But then eventually we reached out to the house of this friend, and a few days later he came. He took us to Headhunter, like a lady that she
Mhm.
was placing young student or young people to go to work in different restaurants and bars in London. And in a matter of hours, we got our first job. So we went to work in this Italian restaurant, during which time I was able to go to school, learn English. I then met my wife, and then the rest is history, because and then I started to understand the hospitality world and how big it was and how many opportunities there were, and not just restaurants but hotels and the real estate and investment company and everything, spa, wellness. The industry was so big that I said to myself, I need to study now. So I went back to school at the age of 28. I got my diploma, and then my first job was in London, in Jumeirah Beach Hotel in Dubai. And then from Jumeirah Beach, Dubai, I went to Four Seasons in Singapore. From Four Seasons Singapore, I went to the Hilton in Kuala Lumpur. And from there, I went to Aman Resort in New Delhi. Then I went to the Intercontinental Al Bustan Palace in Muscat, in Oman. And then I went to Lux Hotels and Resort in Mauritius, and followed by St. Regis, Mauritius. From there, I came back to the Caribbean with Aman Resort for the second time. And then finally, I landed in Mexico, where I've been living now for the past 7 years. Very happily.
And your family just went with you wherever you went.
They went with me. They followed me for these 28 years. So my wife, she said to me, "Now that's enough. I want to stop traveling. I'm done with traveling. I'm done with packing and unpacking."
Yeah.
And so now we've been living in Mexico for the past 7 years. And to be honest, actually, I also like Mexico. It's a beautiful country with nice people. So yeah, why not? It's a big country anyway. It will take me maybe another 10 years to explore everything. So I'm sure I'll be busy.
Well, so you're clearly obviously enjoying being in Mexico, but you're not currently in the hotel industry directly, right?
Well, what I'm doing, Mike, now, over the past 3 years, I left the operation as such, if you want to say that, and I start to work as a consultant. So I've been working for different companies in different parts of Mexico, but I also worked in Dominican Republic for one hotel group, then in Puerto Rico for another group. I've been doing some remote work for Saudi Arabia, Bali, and it seems that something is going to happen maybe in Belize. So I can proudly say that I've been busy, very busy actually, even though I never worked as a consultant. Normally I consult for one company, which is my employer, but I've been doing up to 7 clients at the same time. Last year, for example, I had 1.7 clients working at the same time. So try to remember everything for each of them was not so easy, but I managed. It was fun. It's a difference from being in operation, of course, and but it's as interesting because you learn so much from a different angle now, not just operation and guest, but also you learn about development, architecture, design, brand, rebranding, sometimes construction, concept development, many other things, which before I was not involved. And also to finish that, I also work directly with owners or investors. So that's also a very interesting point.
So it's a kind of a different environment for you than it was, but the fact that you have all the hotel knowledge must be something that people look for, and they hire you because they value the expertise that you have.
In fact, actually, my tagline on my LinkedIn page is actually Rocco Bova, hotel expert.
There you go, hotel expert.
And I can say that, yes, I do have quite some expertise. I've been working in this industry for about 30 years. I do educate myself every day for at least 2 hours a day, every day. I keep up to date with the trends, with the evolution of the industry. And, I try to anticipate what's coming up, because in order for you to be ready for what is happening, you need to, be prepared or even know what is coming next. Trends are predictable, to be frank. If you are a good observer and a good listener to what's happening in other parts of the world, eventually will come to your part of the world. So so I keep an ear open always, every single day. That's what is my advantage.
So what do you do for 2 hours every day to keep your education up?
Well, there are so many platforms where you can learn on a daily basis. I'm talking about digital magazine, newsletters, website. LinkedIn itself is a great platform. You can actually learn, the news, new hotel opening, new concept opening, new company forming, new brand. So it's a great platform, and it's all free. Those days, 30 years ago, we had to go to a library and there was no internet. You have to buy books, or you have to buy magazine to learn. You have to spend money. Now it's all free. It's all there available. So it's just a matter of one being focused in knowing where to go and search for those information.
So what do you think the hotel industry has become? What kinds of changes do you think in the hotel or in the travel and tourism industry in general? How has it changed over the years since you started working there?
Well, nothing has changed until something happened about 3 years ago, to be honest. Everything was working pretty well, to be frank. And the industry was going through a time of was going through a transformation. It was a positive transformation. And then the pandemic arrived, Mike, and then everyone thought that, after the pandemic, we're all going to be friends, and we're all going to be closer, we're all going to be hugging each other. And then suddenly, I can tell you that it's actually not like this anymore. I am observing more and more, actually, that the industry is becoming colder. It's becoming a lot more focused on bottom line. It's becoming a lot more focused on business, just being a business. Hospitality is also a business. But first is about people, being hospitable. And I think we're losing a little bit about this value of working in our industry. It's actually being hospitable genuinely. But I understand, people lost a lot of money. Some people lost their jobs, and we lost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, great people working in the hospitality industry during the pandemic that will never come back, ever. Because what happened was, the most company, they got rid of, something that they thought it was going to be a cost, which is the payroll, call it the payroll, but, they are people. So the first call was to reduce the number of people working for the company, because that's we can save our business. But they didn't think about the effect of this decision. So guess what? Now we're struggling to find talent. We're struggling to find committed people that they actually want to stay with the company for long time. And when I say long time, I don't mean to say for 10 years, but give it at least 1 year. there's a huge turnover at the moment, which is nearly unmanageable. In the old days, we knew that turnover in hospitality industry was big, but now it's bigger. And I feel that most companies, they're not doing much to reduce that, or to control, or to influence, in a positive way. And probably this was also one of the reasons why I decided to get into consultancy. Maybe. Yeah.
Why do you think that is, though? Why do you think that we have such a turnover? Do you think it's just because of the coldness of the industry? And more important, how do you think we reverse that?
Well, one of the biggest reason is actually that if people don't care anymore, they say, if you don't treat me well, I just go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And there are jobs available. There is plenty of jobs available. So companies are desperate for talent. Most of the time, the recruitment process is not the same as it was before. They will take you because they need people. They need legs and hands to get the job done. And on the other hand, there is also a salary factor. People, they say, oh, well, if I work there, they can pay me 20% more. Let me give it a try. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's not good. And if it's not good, I can change again. So there is lack of commitment, and there is a focus on earning more, basically.
So go ahead.
No, and I was saying, even if most companies they have increased the pay, because they had to do it. There was no other way. With the increase of price for cost of living and so on and so forth, inflation and so on, they were obliged to increase salary by 10, 20, even in some places, even up to 30%. But even with that, has no change. So the commitment has no change. So that means that people will change again if they feel that they're not properly treated in a place. So you were asking me, okay, what is the solution to that? I don't know if there is a solution, but I personally have started to work on a personal project called My Humble House. And this happened actually during the pandemic. So 3 years ago, I started to work on a hotel concept, on a business model that I think it could be the solution to this problem. And it's something very simple, actually, it's not so complicated. So I said to myself, what if I was part of the business? What if I was responsible for the success of the financial business of my company that employs me? And so I started to work on a business model that involves profit sharing with the employees. And then I started to develop this concept. I wrote about 60 pages of the business plan. And I started to share it with a lot of people, about 300 plus people around the world. And guess what? I received compliment on compliment and more compliment from more people all over the world. I opened a LinkedIn page actually where I have 4,000 followers already. I was invited to several podcasts like yours. I was invited to write even articles on business magazine, or focusing on on hospitality. And from that, I gather that there is a need for something like this. I'm not saying that this is the only solution, but I feel that there is definitely a need for something like this. And by the comments that I hear from different people, and I'm talking about senior people. I'm not talking about the waiter or the housekeeper. I'm talking about senior C-level executive that they all told me, Rocco, this is a great idea. When can you start one? So now I'm at the point that I'm looking actually for investors, and watch this space, Mike. You might hear of My Humble House soon around your corner.
So what's the idea? How does it work?
It works very simply. Is a hotel. This concept I cannot change it. A hotel is a hotel and will always be a hotel. But the point is the business model. So generally, a hotel, when it first opens, it takes about 2 to 3 years to get to break-even point. But the business model for My Humble House, is actually to join hotel room with residences. So we all know that branded residences is nothing new. Four Seasons do it, Ritz-Carlton do it, Mandarin Oriental do it. So it's a proven business model, which means that if I have 25 rooms and I have 15 residences that I can sell, and I invest, let's say, $20 million, I have 15 residences, maybe each resident I can sell it for $1 million each. By the time I sell all the residences, I already gained $15 million that can help me get to the return on the investment much faster. Instead of waiting 7 years, I may get into 3 years. The moment you get your return on the investment, investors are very happy, but also you get into the break-even point faster because you have an inventory that is more efficient. I like to remind you that to manage 25 rooms or to manage 40 rooms, you actually need the same number of staff. You don't need to double your staff because you're doubling your inventory of rooms. And so when you become an efficient business, it's easier to get to your break-even point. The moment you start making profit, you can share this profit with your employees. What would an employee feel? Hey, if I earn more, if my boss earn more, or the company I work for earns more, I can earn more too. And that generates more commitment, longer term commitment, honesty. People actually do their job instead of wasting time, because they know if they're more efficient, they actually become better in business. People that they're selling the business, for example, salespeople, they actually do sell because they know if they sell more, they're going to earn more. So everything becomes so much more organic, and everyone will become part of the success of the business. That's why I'm so convinced that profit sharing is actually the future of the business model of this industry, maybe every industry. Why only few people? They need to make lots of money. I think that the cake is big enough and everyone can benefit.
So you think that by adding the profit sharing component, that's the kind of thing that will keep employees, and that they won't just jump ship because they think they could get a better deal somewhere else, that profit sharing is a major game changer?
That's one of the reason why. It's not just money. Remember that also you need to have great leadership. You need to have a company that cares for you. You need to have a proper amenities for the team members. You need to have a great product also for guests, so that they want to come back, or that at least they want to recommend it. So it's a number of things that you have to have. But when you devise a new business, you devise also for the longer term. You don't devise a new business just for the sake of saying, no, I'm just going to open a few years and then I close down or sell it to somebody else. No, the idea is to start a business for the long term. So yes, the ingredients are there. Hotels have been around for hundreds of years, so it's nothing new. And new brands are needed because a new generation are coming. And this sustainability, let's call it this way, is not just about respect of the environment, but it's also respect of the people, and also making the business sustainable for the long term. If the business is not sustainable for the long term, there's not sustainability at all, basically.
Where does the guest fit in all this? So you've talked about the investors, you've talked about the C-level managers, and you've talked about the employees and all that. How do the guests influence all of that?
I love this question, Mike. I think it's right spot on. Where do the guests fit? So imagine I am a guest, I'm going to a hotel, and I feel team members with a huge, genuine smile. The first thought that comes to my mind is, hey, this guy must be very happy here. So I'm going to ask him, hey, why are you so happy? Guess what? The employee can only say, hey, this is a great company. They take care of me. They look after me. They even share their profit. Imagine the guest reaction. What? The company share profit with you as an employee? And the employee will say, yes, they do. Actually, every month or every year, at the end of the year, if the company is profitable, we get share of this profit. So imagine the reaction of the guest. Well, you may say to me, well, maybe they will avoid tipping the individual. But the employee, when the employee is actually so happy, they'll provide the best service ever to a guest. And the guests, when they see that a company takes care of their employees, they return and they recommend. Why I'm saying this? Because I also work for a company that they take very good care of their employees. I work for Four Seasons. I work for Jumeirah. I work for Aman Resort. I work for Lux Hotels Resort. I work for company that even the worst situation, the worst scenario, they took care of their team member first. And guess what? They're still there. If they were not so good, Jumeirah will no longer be there. If Four Seasons was not taking care of their team members, they wouldn't be there. So I know for a fact that taking care of the team members definitely work for the business and for the guest.
It seems to me that, of course, that's true for any company. And I don't know whether it's a relatively new concept that you're introducing to the hospitality industry, but in general, certainly employees and everything clicks better when people are happier, they're having fun. I know that I get to observe a lot of airline personnel as I travel. And I mainly use American because I've been using them for 42 years now, although I think that the airline industry has created a lot of challenges and is not what it was 40 years ago. But I know that when I travel on Southwest Airlines, the employees seem to, at least the last time I was on the flight and the last several times I was on a Southwest flight, they're having a lot more fun and they seem more happier than on any other airline that I've experienced. And they like that. And that reaction flows down to the passengers on the airplane.
You see, I'm not inventing anything here. It transpires to the customers when team members, they're very happy or they feel comfortable being around the workplace. And you can see immediately when a team member is not happy because they drag their feet, because they are moody, because they don't even say good morning to you. So would you stay in a place where people don't care about you as a customer?
Yeah.
Of course not. Of course not. So it's a reaction. And a lot of people, they say, well, but why do I need to waste money on training? Why do I need to waste money on benefit for the team members? But, why not? If you don't do it, what is going to happen? What is the worst case scenario? That you close business, you shut down because your business is not doing well enough. So, I'm very careful also in choosing to work for certain companies, and I'm very, very analytic, when it comes to deciding whether I work for a company or not. And sometimes I prefer to step out of a company if I feel that this is not for me. I have nothing to lose. I actually have a lot to lose if I stay. Yeah. So I prefer to step out.
Well, if they're not willing to utilize your expertise, I can understand that. And it's unfortunate that we do see so much of all of that happening. And the pandemic hasn't helped because, as you said, now people want more money and they want a lot of things. But again, is that really it? Or is it more that they want a really great feeling workplace to be involved with?
What I see, Mike, is that not that just new generation. I belong to Generation X. That's 53 years old now, and I feel like a millennial, but I'm a Generation X by age. Let's put it this way. And starting already from my generation, I'm starting to be more aware of my environment, and it's not just a matter of I need to work for this brand because it's the best brand in the world, or I need to work for this hotel because they won so many awards. No. First and most important thing for me is to work. Who are the people behind this company? Who do I report to? what is my relationship with these people? What am I going to get? Not just what they're going to get out of me. What am I going to get from them? And the choice becomes smaller because obviously you start to eliminate immediately. If you are, let's say, an expert, let's say, in reading, the situation, you can understand if this company is for you or not by reading the people you are interviewed by, for example. So definitely is something that is different now. Now, talking about the new generation, they might be careless. They say, okay, let's give it a try. There's nothing to lose. Okay, they try with one, they stay a few months, then say, you know what? No, this is not for me. I'm going. Resign, they go somewhere else, and then they go somewhere else, and they go somewhere else. Because as I said, jobs are plenty at the moment. So there are many opportunities, and people, even people that they are tech knowledgeable, they can even work from home or can do something online. They can program something, maybe an application, and they can earn some money very quickly. They can just work on Uber or something like that. So there are many ways to earn money today. It's not just about having a full-time job.
Right. How do you think Airbnb has affected the hospitality industry?
Airbnb,
I thought that was an interesting question. I thought I would spring up and just see what you thought.
I love it, Michael. When Airbnb grew up so quickly, the hoteliers were scared. Oh my God, what are we going to do now? We have these Airbnb guys that they broke everything. There was no longer the hotels only, and now there are also homes. What are we going to do? We're going to lose so much business. Did we? Hotels keep opening, new brands keep sprouting, the room count around the world keeps growing. The population of the world keeps growing too, by the way. So we are 8+ billion people right now in this planet, and the likelihood is that we're going to keep growing even to more people than that in the next 10, 15, 20 years. So the scare of being affected by Airbnb, to me, it was unnecessary, and it's proven by the fact that actually Airbnb pushed hotels to get better. So why do I need to go to an Airbnb and not to a hotel? So hotels, they need to start to get the game up because Airbnb was getting the game up very quickly. Airbnb lately started to lose ground. They became too commercial. They grew too much, and there is literally no control. So it's just room rental for one night or 2 nights or whatever. I'm actually happy that some cities like New York, Venice, Rome, Berlin, and so on and so forth, they're starting to put rules because it's impossible to get a normal rental in city center. So that was not good also for normal people like me and you. If I want to rent an apartment in the center of London or New York or Boston, I don't need to spend $10,000 a month. I want to spend a normal rent, which is reasonable. And so I'm glad that some rules are starting to come into place for Airbnb, because in case you don't know, but probably you do, Airbnb was not born to rent room for one night. Airbnb was born to rent a room for students for long term, not short term. And when we say short term, it definitely was not one night or two. It was for a month or 2 months, maybe 45 days. But again, Airbnb became another hotel, another way to be a hotel without having the permit, the licenses, paying taxes, and so on and so forth. So from that point of view, I think that some regulation, they should have come even much earlier. I don't know why it took so long.
And I think it makes sense to deal with something like an Airbnb for long-term rentals, because that's not what hotels typically are designed for.
No. Well, for that you have service apartments, which is like a hotel, but it's for long-term rental. You have proper amenities for long-term rental.
Or you have Airbnb, and that's fine. personally, for me, I certainly wouldn't want to. I like when I go somewhere to use a hotel room because I don't want to take on the responsibility of preparing food or doing other things like that. But I also know I'm only staying for 1 or 2 nights or just a few nights. And I've been in long-term rental apartment situations, and that's fine, but that's different too. So when I travel, I just think that it works a whole lot better for me to be in a hotel environment. I know when my wife was alive, since she was in a wheelchair, it also was a lot more relevant for her because most Airbnb type houses that were made available for rental were not necessarily overly wheelchair accessible. And there's nothing that makes that happen, or there hasn't been.
That's correct. That's correct. But on the other hand, we also are in a situation where even Airbnb are starting to transform themselves because they reach a point of stabilizing. So what is going to be next for Airbnb as well? They cannot remain what Airbnb was 10 years ago. They need to start to innovate as well. I feel that's why they're losing ground a bit, Airbnb. I think they did not innovate enough. Since the past 5-7 years. They have not changed their business model. They try to make this experience, live like a local stuff. Definitely is not for them because they don't manage this. Somebody else does it for them. I just feel that Airbnb is probably time for them to shake the tree a little bit, and get something new.
We'll see what they do.
Absolutely.
So you've talked a lot about the talent pool and that people know they can make a lot more money sometimes if they go somewhere else or they feel they can. Where's going to be the end of all that? Is it a spiral that's out of control and is never going to change, or what do you think will happen?
Listen, the next 2 years, I think, is where we're gonna see the worst part of our industry. I have a feeling that what's happening right now is only going to get worse for at least another couple of years. During these 2 years, I hope that the industry is going to do something, and I hope that they understand that if we don't do anything, it's just going to get worse and worse. So maybe this is also why this battle, my personal battle of getting this off the ground, this Humble House project, which may never take off. But as far as I'm concerned, it's already off the ground because a lot of people is already asking me for, and is very curious. So the curiosity for me, that means that there is a need for change in the business model of the industry. I also feel that, that small investors, they should be encouraged. When I say startups, I don't mean startups only in technology. We should also encourage and help young investors in actually getting into independent hotels rather than be part of a big chain. So there is a trend right now, for example, that more and more people, they want to experience an independent hotel and not big brands hotel. That's why big brands, they keep churning new brands every month because customers want something new, but getting out a new brand from Marriott is just going to be another Marriott. I'm sorry to say that, but
yeah.
I don't think Marriott can really make a new brand. They just make another Marriott, which is called something else, but it still is a Marriott. So is Hilton, so is Intercontinental. So for as long as we don't help people, and young investors, for example, young entrepreneurs to get into business, I think it's going to be very difficult to create something innovative, really.
Well, when you look at, let's say, Hilton, you've got Hilton Garden Inn, you've got Hampton Inn and Suites, and you've got Embassy Suites, for example, and they're different, but it all comes under the Hilton brand. Every Embassy Suites looks alike. I like Embassy Suites because of some of the amenities, but is it really a major innovation? I guess that's a subject that people could probably debate.
Totally, and all these brands, obviously, they observed there was a segment, there was a niche market that was looking for that kind of product, and that's why they created, which is fine. But can we really make something really unique, really cool?
Yeah.
I think that the last cool brand, in hospitality was probably 30 years ago, when the W hotels came, and then maybe, this Ian Scragger, for example, it was kind of innovative in creating this lifestyle, cool vibe, young models and men and women, going into these bars lively with cool live music. But, from there, everybody copy, paste, it was not really innovation any longer. So I think, I hope that there will be some kind of change. So yeah, the glamping is now coming up as one of this hot topic at the moment. So cabins and tents and whatever, everything that is luxury. They have air conditioning and they have all the amenities like a hotel, but they're in the middle of the jungle. This is also kind of new, so it's only 5-6 years that has become kind of very hot topic. But let's see what else is gonna happen. That's why I say personally, I didn't want to reinvent the hotel concept as such. I wanted to reinvent personally, with my humble house, the business model more than the hotel concept. Because hotel concept at the end of the day is still the same. No matter what you do, whether it's glamping or whether it's a luxury big box hotel.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, absolutely.
It's the other parts of the infrastructure, as you're talking about, that are an issue. Well, it's like the talent pool in general. What do you think the hotel industry is going to have to do? And maybe the other way to look at it is, what do you think that the talent is going to have to do to change to address some of the issues that we're facing now? And you said that you think it'll get worse over the next 2 years. What do you think has to change or will change that will kind of hopefully bring things back to a little bit more even keel?
Well, the first, we need to get back to school. Let's look at the school system.
I was going to ask about that. Go ahead.
If you go to hotel school, what are they going to teach you first? And second, who are the teachers teaching you?
Yeah.
Most teachers, probably their last job was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Then they got into teaching, and then they went back to work. So they're teaching you something that they've learned 15 years ago, which is already obsolete, completely obsolete. Hotel schools, normally they send students every year or 2 years, they send them to 6 months internship. If I were in the school system, I would send the teachers every year, at least for 1 month, back to work to actually understand what's really is going on in the industry firsthand, not through Google or books or whatever investigation. No, to live exactly what's happening in the industry. The second thing, I think, is that the programs are also, they don't teach students on how to get into work immediately. I mean, probably some school they do, but they don't tell you they don't tell you the real stuff. They only tell you the fluffy stuff. What is beautiful and what works. And so, you can meet a lot of people, which is so true. But let's talk about the real life story. Let's talk about, let's teach young students how to make a choice between brand A and brand B, and people A and people B. How can you choose the best people to work for? What are the things that you need to look when you join a company? Not just the brand and how many awards and how many stars they have under their belt, but who are the leaders behind? So important nowadays. And last but not the least, we should lower the expectations. I think that many schools, they give you expectations of, when you come out from here, you become a manager. Wait a minute. I remember I made something public some 6 months ago on LinkedIn. There was a Swiss hotel school which, where their tagline, come as a student, leave as a manager. Wait a minute. Oh my God. I obviously made it public. I was I had like 22,000 like or something like this in this post. It was very popular, and and I also was approached by the school itself, and they told me, "Hey, Rocco, no, we didn't mean that. We didn't want to say this specifically." But I said, "Okay, well, so what is that you want to say? Be honest with yourself and with the students. You cannot promise. You cannot overpromise and say, no, of course, you come to us and you become a manager. It doesn't work like that. You have to be honest also, with young people, because to become a manager, it takes time. To become a manager takes knowledge. You have to learn even more when you get out of school, and you have to go through rough time to understand how to become a manager. So I remember one 3 years ago, 4 years ago, before the pandemic, I had this student from a very prestigious hotel school in Switzerland, and he said to me, Rocco, I want to be a consultant. And I told him, okay, let's talk about it in another 25 years. Then I can tell you how to be a consultant. And he said to me, why 25 years? I said, because it took me 25 years to become a consultant. Now, today, I can say I can consult anyone because I've got the experience. But 25 years ago, I didn't know how to consult. Google doesn't tell me how to consult. ChatGPT doesn't tell me how to consult someone. People, they want to know exactly what to do with their business. As a consultant, my success depends on what I say to my client. So anyway, he didn't like that and he didn't talk to me ever since. But that's okay.
Well, the other part about it is that we live in a world that has been taught to demand instant gratification in instant things. And the reality is it doesn't work that way. And you know that, and I know that. There are so many people who don't understand that. That's come to our school as a student and leave as a manager. What are you teaching them about management? How are you doing it? And, if they're just doing the same old stuff, they're not certainly teaching someone how to truly be a manager, because a manager isn't just someone who knows how to run a hotel, but a manager has to learn the skills of how to deal with employees, how to deal with the people who come to the hotel as guests. What do you do? How do you do it? And how do you make people feel welcome on all sides?
Absolutely. And, the most difficult part in our industry, or possibly any industry, is actually dealing with people, both customers and employees. But in our industry, I say more our industry because our industry is made of people. We deal with human feeling every single moment, every single instant. We're dealing with people feelings. So the way you talk to people, the tone of voice, your body language, your attitude, your mood, influence everything and everyone around you. So if you don't know how to control that, how to manage yourself first, how can you manage others? Impossible. Even less consulting. I mean, come on, let's get real. So
you've said that we've lost millions of people because of the pandemic and so on, who will never come back. How do we work to get some of those people back?
You see, Michael, again, I go back to the title of your podcast, Unstoppable. And not everybody is unstoppable. Not everybody was actually able to have this stamina to continue no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody was able to come over fear of not knowing what was going to happen to them and to their family and to the people, to the loved one tomorrow. So being unstoppable is not for everybody. I think that the people that they knew or they became unstoppable because of their strength, because of their willingness, and because of their stamina, they made it. And they will make it again, no matter what is going to happen, next, they will make it again. And I've learned that over time. It's not the first crisis that I go through, probably just like you. My first big one was the Twin Tower in New York. I was in the Middle East at the time, and everyone coming from the Middle East was a terrorist, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
We lost business one day to the next. We went from 90% occupancy to zero in a matter of days. When I was in Singapore in 2003, we had the first pandemic, which didn't spread as far as COVID, but SARS was just as bad for Southeast Asia. It was terrible. All the hotels in Southeast Asia were empty. And then we had 2008, the financial crisis, and then in 2008-7, I was in New Delhi where we had terrorist attack, with the Taj Mahal and so on and so forth. And then I was in Oman, and we had this Arab Spring, and then now we also had this pandemic. So it's not the first time I go through a crisis, but a crisis also give a lot of opportunities. So if people get into fear, that's where they get lost. That's where they become. They don't know what to do. They get in panic and they freeze. Instead, when you get into a crisis mode, you need to stay more focused and understand how can I make the most of this moment? What can I do now? And believe it or not, that also when I went through this particular COVID, it was fearful for me. I cannot lie to you that I was very fearful. For the first time, actually, I also came into this freezing position. But then, after a few weeks, I start to talk to myself and say, Rocco, you cannot do that. Your family depends on you. Your livelihood depends on you. Your mental health depends on you. You got to do something. And then suddenly I was listening to some podcast, and then one guy inspired me so much. I removed my fears immediately, and I made a decision that actually changed my life and changed the life of the 150 employees that they were working at the time in the company in Chablé, Yucatan, where I was employed at the time. And guess what? From that moment, I became so much stronger, so much self-confident, and so much secure that, again, in a situation of a crisis, there is an opportunity.
And isn't that what it's about? And I think that you realize that there are so many things that you can't control. And as I talk about here a lot, there are, all the things that you do have control over, and those are the ones that you have to address. And you chose to let your fear be a tool for you, and you chose to not fear and be overwhelmed by stuff. And yeah, COVID is certainly something that affects all of us and affected all of us. And I don't know when or if that is going to totally go away. And I don't know how, I don't know how it's going to progress. They're talking about there being a major upsurge during the winter, and that's very possibly going to happen. And we're going to have to deal with that. But that isn't something that I have control over. That isn't something that you have control over. But we certainly do have control over how we choose to deal with it, and whether we allow fear to overwhelm us or whether we allow fear to strengthen us, which is what you're talking about here.
Absolutely. And become unstoppable.
And, I think everyone can be unstoppable, but many people choose not to learn to grow. And unstoppable, in part, also really requires that you look at yourself. People don't like to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only agree with you with that.
So it is a challenge. Well, any last thoughts that you want to add to what we've talked about? We've been doing this for an hour, and I've really enjoyed it, especially the last 5 minutes. I love what you've had to say, but anything that you want to leave as final thoughts for us?
Well, Michael, I can only say that the hospitality industry is the most wonderful industry in the world. I will not change this for anything. I will do everything all over again for another million times. I keep loving the industry. I think it's still a wonderful place to be, and something that you can teach to others. The hospitality industry teaches you a lot, by the way, as is an industry that prepares you for so many things. You have situation of fires, bombs, explosion, you name it. Everything happens in a hotel. You know that.
Yeah.
And definitely is an industry I would recommend it to anyone, because it makes you a better person. That's why I was so glad when my son told me that he was going to study hospitality management. So I'm very proud of him, and of my daughter as well, because maybe she will get into the industry as well. Even though she's studying marketing, doesn't say that maybe she's not going to join the industry too. So let's see that.
We'll see how that goes. Have you written any books?
You know what? I'm not going to lie to you, but the last book I read was the biography of Steve Jobs.
But you've not written any. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was saying that I don't like Apple as a brand. I'm not an Apple guy, and I have my laptop, my window, and my phone is a Google based Google software. So I'm not an Apple guy. However, I love how Apple was born and how they grew up to become what it is today. It's a global brand. It's one of the most successful brand ever invented, and I love how Steve Jobs actually made this brand what it is today. If today Steve Jobs was alive, I think that Apple would have been 10 times more successful than what it is today.
I agree.
At least 10 times. So I love the guy, but I don't like Apple. Sorry. Sorry for everybody else.
Well, I like the iPhone because it's the most accessible smartphone. Now that happened in part because Apple was going to be sued if they didn't fix it, but they chose to do it and they did a great job. They're about 95% there. There are still things that they should do that they're not, but overall, I know what you're saying as far as the hospitality industry. So you haven't written your own book yet, and maybe someday you'll decide to do that.
Let's see. I'm still too young. Hopefully,
there you go.
Hopefully, before I retire, I consider that and see. I need to find a ghost writer, and perhaps somebody can help me with that.
They are out there, and
yes.
So that's certainly something that's good to do. Well, my first book was published when I was 61. So see, there you go. You've got 8 years.
Exactly.
Well, I want to thank you, Rocco, for being with us. This has been a lot of fun. And I think not only inspirational, but I've learned a lot. And I love to hear your discussions about business and so on, which validates so many things. So thank you for doing it and for being here with us. And I want to thank you for listening out there. We really appreciate it. Rocco, if people want to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Michael, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can type my full name, Rocco Bova. You can definitely find there are not many people with my name. So
can you spell that? Could you spell it, please?
Yes, it's ROCCO. That's my name, and my family name is Bova. So you can find me very easily on LinkedIn. And then you can follow me, and I'll be very happy to follow back. And let's learn from each other. I make my profile open and public, so people can actually reach out. You can send me a message without being connected as well. So I reply to everyone that send me a message. So reach out if you want to have an opinion, or if you want just talk to me. I'll be happy to do so.
There you go. So reach out to Rocco and tell him what you think and have a discussion with him. I enjoyed this, and we're going to stay in touch for sure. And I hope that wherever you're listening, you'll give us a 5-star rating. We would really appreciate that. And of course, as always, I really value getting your emails and your comments. And if you'd like to email me, please do so at michaelhi@accessibe.com. That's MICHAELHI @ACCESSIBE.com. or go to our podcast page, which is www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson is MichaelHingson, all one word. But please give us a 5-star rating. Reach out to Rocco. I think you'd have a fun time discussing this with him and whatever you want to talk about with him. So I think it makes perfect sense to do. And I hope that people will reach out to you, Rocco. And once again, I want to just thank you for being here with us and making us be able to be a part of your day.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation, Mike. Stay in touch.